Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Semenyo time. Arsenal. Come on, you gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, your host, Harry Semenyo. Hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. Welcome back to the show. The international break is almost over. Some interesting games on tonight that I will be keeping across, but we're one day closer, aren't we, to the return of the Premier League, to the return of Arsenal to action. And we're going to build up to that game. That big game, that huge game at Emirates Stadium starting from tomorrow, because there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to unpack. It's the North London derby, which is a game that deserves special attention anyway. But when it's the first game back after an international break, I think it does add to the buzz and to the hype that surrounds the return. So we're going to break it down. We're going to have a good look at Spurs, because I look at Spurs and I think that there's some odd analysis of them at the moment, sort of doing the rounds. I was at their game against Manchester United. I commentated on that game, and I felt a really sort of strange atmosphere inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I felt like there was this group of fans that were watching their team or have been watching their team over the course of the season so far compete and climb up the table significantly versus where they were last season, but who clearly have concerns about the style of play, about the home form, and the way that they kind of turned on Thomas Frank when he made a substitution that turned out to be a very impactful one, by the way, when he took Xavi Simons off and he brought Matthias Tel on. I thought that said a lot about where the Tottenham fans are at with him at the moment. So there's a strange atmosphere around Spurs at the moment. So we'll have a good look at them as the week progresses. But on today's show, we've got a few things to discuss. We're going to talk about Michael Oliver, who is going to be back in charge of an Arsenal game this Sunday for the first time since he incorrectly sent Miles Lewis-Skelly off. Now, this is not me saying it was incorrect, even though I did at the time. It's not you saying it was incorrect. The decision was overturned. And I think for a referee, that must be a bit of a punch in the gut. Now, I think we're talking about the good of the sport. That's the most important thing. And so if there is an error made, it's right that it's corrected. It's right that it's overturned. It doesn't change the fact that we went down to 10 men on the day. But, you need these things to be rectified and to be put right. But it does then create a discussion and a conversation around the official, which can make it harder for them to do their job when they turn up to referee again. And in this case, Michael Oliver hasn't refereed an Arsenal game for ages. Now, this is mad to me, right? Because Michael Oliver, regardless of what you think of the standard of officiating and refereeing in this country, is ranked as the best, if not the best, then certainly one of the best that this country has to offer. Arsenal are one of the biggest teams in this country, one of the teams that have been involved in the title race for the last few seasons. And that game against Wolves, it was back in January. And I remember that because I was in Cyprus. I traveled over to Cyprus for my cousin's wedding. And I remember sneaking off in between the church service and the reception to go and watch this game. I thought everybody's there. They're going to take ages. Everyone's going to say congratulations to them. And it's Cyprus and everyone does things at 2 miles an hour. And I thought by the time this lot get their act together and make their way to the venue, do you know what? I can go to the bar around the corner and I can watch this game. So I remember this game very, very clearly. It's mad to me that Michael Oliver hasn't refereed Arsenal since then. But that is the case, as was confirmed by many people who were reporting the story yesterday. So, Michael Oliver will be back in charge of an Arsenal game for the first time since that controversial decision against Wolverhampton Wanderers, where, of course, Miles Lewis-Skelly was sent off. So, how do I feel about it? Not any type of way, to be honest with you. As I say, my gripes with the standard of officiating in this country still remain there, and I still remain frustrated by the volume of unexplainable decisions that we get, by the inconsistency that we see on a week-to-week basis. But I don't think this is a problem that is, basically on Michael Oliver or any other official for that matter. I think that the standards are not good enough. I don't think they get the support that they need. I don't think that some of the laws, which are very, very subjective at times, I don't think that helps them. I think there's a problem with officiating on the whole in this country. And I think for a league that is supposed to be the best league in the world, and is certainly seen as that by many, many people, I think the standard has to be higher. And it's on the powers that be to ensure that that improves and to make that right and to get it better. But I'm not one of these fans that's going to turn up and go, oh, yeah, forget it. We're not going to win on Sunday now because Michael Oliver's in charge. I don't see it like that. Do our bit, do our thing, and we should be fine. But Michael Oliver, as I say, who's been obviously kept away from an Arsenal game for a while, for whatever reason, maybe it just didn't work out like that. There's never been any communication to say otherwise. Perhaps, at the time when that decision was overturned, those who allocate the referees felt it was right to just create a bit of distance between Michael Oliver and Arsenal after that decision that left many, many Arsenal players on the day feeling incensed. And obviously Arsenal were vindicated in the end because that decision was overturned and Miles Lewis-Skelly's ban was lifted as a result of that. So, yeah, maybe it just didn't work out like that. I'm not saying that there was a reason or that there was a conscious decision taken to make that happen. I can't say that because I don't know, but it feels like at least in that scenario, you say, you know what, stay at the firing line for a little bit. Let's keep you apart from Arsenal for a few weeks. And then, here we are, somewhat 12. It will be the 12th game into the season. And he's taking charge of Arsenal for the first time since. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Let's get some of your comments on this because it's a subject that has sparked quite the decision. D. Evagoru says, good morning, Harry, and all those in the chat. Please, God, no, not Oliver. Can't stand this cheat. We've got Andy who says, I can point to 5 terrible red cards by Oliver, just as bad as this one. He clearly has a bias of some sort. There's no other explanation possible. Referees overall lack on top of it. Guitar Solo says, Michael Oliver will want to overcompensate and hand us favourable decisions. Amberley says, I'm sure it's a complete coincidence he's making his return on a massive game for Arsenal just when City are back in the title race. Look, what I'm not going to do is say that Michael Oliver's a cheat. I'm not going to do that, okay? Because I don't believe that any of these referees go out there with the intention of doing someone over. I just don't. I'm sorry. I just don't. I think what we've got is unconscious biases that exist, and, they exist in all of us. And I think we've got to understand that that's human nature. For example, if you are a referee who has come across a certain club multiple times, and, those players get in your face maybe a little bit more than others or a little bit more critical of you, whether you believe that that is creeping into your mindset or not, it is. It could be subconscious. It could be completely subconscious, right? So I think that it's dangerous to start saying that this guy's a cheat and that guy's a cheat. I won't say that because I don't know that they're cheats. I don't know anything that you guys don't. So for me, I'm not going to sit there and say he's a cheat or he's not and whatever. For me, they're just, sometimes they show an incompetence. And sometimes I have sympathy for them because I think the rules are such a mess. For example, okay, you go back to the Liverpool or the Man City Liverpool game just before the international break, right? That Virgil van Dijk goal that was ruled out, that was disallowed for offside. That's such a subjective decision that even yesterday, over a week later, 2 weeks later, we were debating it on TalkSport. Should that goal have been chalked off? Was that the right decision? And you can go around the houses all day long and never reach a general consensus on something like that, because for me, the rules make it very, very difficult to do so. They leave things open to interpretation. And where things are left open to interpretation, you end up with debate, argument, discussion, and that creates a discourse. Now, things like the Miles Lewis Skelly sending off that Michael Oliver clearly got wrong, there was no debate about that. I remember watching it at the time and thinking, has he seen something that I haven't? And then I watched the replay over and over and over again, trying desperately to spot whatever it was that Michael Oliver thought he'd seen that meant, yep, red card. And I just couldn't see it. I just couldn't see it. And obviously those that reviewed the decision felt the same way and made that decision. But there will be so many calls that are borderline, so many calls that are open to interpretation, that are up for debate, up for challenge. And then what you end up with is a situation where sets of supporters go, well, that didn't go our way, so he must hate us, he must be a cheat. And then that creates narratives that are unhelpful. I think call referees out for the things that they get wrong. Call referees out when the standards aren't good enough. But you should be doing that because you want the game to be in the best state it can possibly be. And there are certain referees that I feel give us a harder time than others. There are certain referees that pick on us in terms of making sure that they apply the law to the letter of the law more than others. But I think that comes from unconscious bias. I think that comes from overthinking things. I think that is partly to do with the pressure that you're under when you take on these games. And so, as I say, I know I've gone on a long sort of tangent here, but I'm not going to sit and say Michael Oliver's a cheat. I do believe that he's one of the country's best referees. I do think the standard overall is not where it should be and it's not good enough, but I'm not going to sit and accuse Michael Oliver of that. I will accuse him at times of being wrong, but to question his integrity, I think, is something completely different. And I don't want to go down that route. I just don't. Anyway, let's move on to our next story because we're going to talk about something that's quite big in terms of the future of the Premier League. And Arsenal are said to be at the centre of this because Arsenal are apparently considering switching sides on this particular debate. So let's get into it, shall we? So as you've heard in recent weeks, there are talks ongoing about the potential of introducing a salary cap in the Premier League. They're going to do this thing which is called anchoring. Now, what that means is that you'll only be able to pay salaries to the total of, I think, something like whatever it is. It's like 5 times. Basically, I can't remember the ins and outs of it. I can't remember exactly what the figure is, what the ratio is. But basically, it's a salary cap that will mean that you can only pay out money based on the amount of money that you are bringing in as a football club, okay? And this is something to try and create a more level playing field. This is something that the Premier League are considering in terms of just trying to tighten the strings a little bit when it comes to spending because it has got out of hand in the Premier League. There's no doubt about that. I know people will say, yeah, but look at what the Saudis are paying and all the rest of it. And that means that the Premier League has to allow it to remain a free market. Otherwise, you end up with players maybe going over there. There's concern that doing something like this, putting this controversial anchoring cap in place, as Martin Zeigler of the Times describes it, is going to allow the likes of La Liga and the likes of Serie A to potentially catch up with the Premier League. Guess what? I don't think that's a bad thing because I think the state of European football is a sorry one right now, and I think that it's important that the sort of leagues around Europe are closer to the Premier League in terms of financial incentives and financial power and muscle and ability, because I think that creates a healthier European football environment, which I think we all benefit from. So basically, from what we understand, prior to Tim Lewis leaving, Arsenal were apparently, and these are reports, okay, I don't know this is not my information, I'm going by what's been reported, what's been said. Tim Lewis was supposedly a big advocate of this. Now, I sat down at a talk with Tim Lewis once, and he was very, very big on and very passionate about financial fair play, sticking to the rules, adhering to the frameworks. And he was the type of person, when he was at Arsenal, that would do everything within his power to go after those that were breaking the rules or that were bending the rules or that were finding, cheeky and clever ways around some of the rules. So I'd imagine that when Tim Lewis was in charge at Arsenal, he was one of the people that was on board with this. And therefore, I think Arsenal as a football club would have been on board with this by default. Now, Arsenal and a lot of the other big clubs do stand to benefit from this, because although they will be limited with regards to what they can spend, the fact that they generate so much more revenue than so many other clubs, it puts them in a really strong position. And what it protects against is the likes of Newcastle under the Saudi ownership coming in and spending a ton of money that they don't generate, so that they can close the gap. And it's not to pick on Newcastle. It's because they've got Saudi ownership, and because they've clearly got the wealth, but they're not able to spend it because of some of the stringent rules in place. This would only make life more difficult for them. My problem with this type of thing is that while I agree that there needs to be something in place, and while I agree there needs to be some governance around this, the horse has already bolted. We allowed Chelsea to rise, and become a powerhouse in English and European football over the last sort of 20 years or so, because there was no such rule or regulation around them. We've allowed Manchester City to do it. And listen, I don't have a problem with what those clubs have done, because I think if my club had that sort of money, I would have loved my club to really kind of put their foot down on the accelerator and progress. So I don't have an issue with it. But my point is that once the horse is already bolted, it's like you've let certain people pass down the road, which has now put them in a place where they can now earn bigger revenues because they've grown globally as a consequence and as a result of their success. But now you're closing the gate on everyone else and saying, well, you can't do what they did, so forever you shall be in their shadow. And that's the bit about this that I don't really like. But I do think there should be something a little bit more strict in place. I do think there should be less loopholes available to clubs that are looking to divert around the financial fair play rules. I like the concept of financial fair play. I do. But I also think that it's got to be really well thought out, because, as I keep saying, we've allowed the horse to bolt already. And actually what you might end up doing is creating an even bigger divide between some of the bigger clubs and some of the smaller clubs, when the very reason that you're supposedly doing this is apparently to try and close that gap. So it feels kind of counterproductive if it's not done in the right way. But according to Martin Zeigler, Arsenal could switch sides now and oppose the controversial anchoring cap, which could deal a blow to the proposed new financial rules. Now, there is a vote due to take place very, very soon about this. And if Arsenal have switched sides, that probably has an impact on the voting. I'm not saying that Arsenal are the deciding vote, because I don't know that. I don't know how the other clubs are going to vote. I don't even know how Arsenal are going to vote. But Martin Zeigler is reporting that Arsenal are about to make a bit of a U-turn on this. And you have to believe, you have to assume, I suppose, that Tim Lewis's departure from the football club has played a part in this, because, as I say, he's someone that was known to be very shit hot on the rules, that was very adamant that they needed to be followed, who was very, very passionate about financial control and the rules and stuff that he wanted to see in place to prevent clubs getting away with what some clubs have done in the past. And again, I'm not judging those clubs. If we had all the money in the world and we were in the doldrums, I would have loved to have seen us spend it too and accelerate our progress and grow as a football club and develop. And, Man City and Chelsea have done that remarkably well, because if you go back to when I was a kid, Man City were not particularly relevant. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. And the same could be said of Chelsea. Chelsea would win the odd FA Cup. They'd get to the odd Coca-Cola Cup final, as it was named then. Maybe sometimes they would challenge for a Champions League spot. I remember there was one year when I was a kid where they were fighting with Liverpool for fourth spot, or for the final Champions League spot, whatever it was at that time. But never did you think that they were going to go on and do what they did over the next 20 years that followed that. And that was a result of big investment and big money. So yeah, let's see how this is going to go. But it looks like Arsenal might have changed stance on this, and Tim Lewis's departure has to have played a part in that. Let's see. Ben says, we don't even make enough money from sales, so I see why Arsenal pulled out. That's certainly something that we need to improve on. Have Arsenal looked at it following Tim Lewis's departure and thought, actually, do you know what? This might not work for us. Honestly, I don't know, but it would be quite the U-turn, wouldn't it, for a club that has always advocated for financial fair play and has sort of pointed at other clubs over the years and said, what they've done is partly why we are where we are and we've struggled as a result of that, to then go, no, actually, you know what? But then you could call it a kind of waking up. You could say it's Arsenal having a bit of an epiphany that says, do you know what? We tried to stick to our principles, but actually it's got to a point where we're one of the big boys again. And so actually voting for this and going down this road is counterproductive. It doesn't work for us. It doesn't help us. Do you see what I mean? So maybe there's been a bit of an epiphany, a change of view on this. I don't know. Amberly says, this doesn't seem like a good idea when other leagues aren't going to do the same, in my opinion. See, I've seen a lot of people say that over the last few weeks while this has been discussed. But I guess my response to that would be quite simple. Like, yeah, I suppose my response to this would be quite simple. If you think that by doing this, players are going to stop coming to the Premier League, I think you're wrong. Because I think that we're still going to be able to pay, the bigger clubs in the Premier League anyway, are still going to be able to pay bigger money to their players than most La Liga clubs, with the exception of maybe Real Madrid and Barcelona, than most Bundesliga clubs, with maybe the exception of Bayern Munich, with all of the Serie A clubs. And so, like, look, I'm going to sound like a right snob for saying this, right? But do you think it's right? Do you think it's right that Bournemouth or Brighton, no disrespect meant to any of those two clubs, but do you think it's right that Bournemouth or Brighton can pay bigger salaries than AC Milan or Juventus? Because I think that's wrong. I think that shows you that the football system is broken. It's broken. It doesn't work. And I think that, yeah, maybe that's snobbery, and that's maybe me doing what I've just said shouldn't happen, which is kind of like, keeping clubs at arm's length and saying, no, you can't progress. But that's growing up when I grew up in an era where AC Milan and Juve were powerhouses of European football. Watching them lose out on players to middle-of-the-road Premier League clubs, that hurts my heart. It doesn't feel right. And it's not a dig at Brighton or at Bournemouth or anyone in the Premier League. It's just an indicator of how far ahead the Premier League on the whole is from everybody else. And I don't think that's healthy in the wider footballing world. So that's where I'm at on that. Okay, we're going to take a short pause. When we come back, we are going to talk Antoine Semenyo, because David Ornstein has been talking about his future, Antoine Semenyo's future. That is not David Ornstein's, as far as I know. He's staying at the Athletic. We'll get into that right after this.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Like and subscribe. Welcome back to the show. Thank you all for being with us on this Tuesday morning. Really, really appreciate all the love and support. Okay, shall we get into the Antoine Semenyo stuff? Because it's been doing the rounds since yesterday. And while there are no links between Antoine Semenyo at Arsenal, certainly nothing credible, certainly nothing that should get you excited. And I often despise talking about transfers in November, to be honest with you. But I want to bring this up because I think it's an interesting conversation at a time where conversations are pretty scarce. It's the international break and all the rest of it. But David Ornstein came out yesterday with a bit of an update on Antoine Semenyo's future. Now, he has been very, very impressive for Bournemouth over the course of the last 18 months or so. And David Ornstein put this out yesterday. Bournemouth may be powerless to prevent Antoine Semenyo's sale in January. His contract includes a £65 million release clause. It's available to all clubs, but it must be triggered by a set date so that Bournemouth have enough time to replace him. Applies again in the summer at a lower price. So if you are one of the clubs that is eyeing up Antoine Semenyo, and there are a few clubs that have been linked with him repeatedly over the last few months. Arsenal have been linked. Man United have been linked. Liverpool have been linked. Man City have been linked. Tottenham have been linked. Just to name a few. If you want to get that deal done, cough up £65 million in January and he is yours, providing you can agree all the other stuff. I think for Bournemouth, people will look at this as a negative as far as they're concerned. And I would say it's not that. I would say that the fact that that release clause in place, it actually protects Bournemouth, because realistically, if that clause does not exist, they're not getting 70 odd million quid for Antoine Semenyo, are they? But because that clause is there, because clubs will look at that and think, okay, there's an opportunity here, they probably end up paying a little bit more than what I would say Antoine Semenyo is worth. Now, I'm not downplaying his ability. I think he's a really good player. I've been really, really impressed with him over the course of the last 18 months. I've thought his performances have been consistent. I think his running power is incredible. He's added goals. He's added assists, all of these things. Don't get me wrong. I like Antoine Semenyo. But the question I suppose we're asking today is, would it make sense for Arsenal? Because we talk a lot about transfers over the course of the summer, and often during the season, we look back on a window and we say, well, we should have done this and we should have done that. And these are all things that are very, very easy to say and to conversate about with hindsight. But I look at Arsenal's attacking options now, the sheer volume of them, and I think we've got, eight players for 3 positions at this moment in time. And I just don't think that the timing here works for us. It's nothing to do with the player's quality. I like him. I like him a lot. If I had to predict whether Arsenal will go and spend money in January, my prediction is probably no. My prediction would be that if they did, it would be based on trying to fix an emergency situation. And that means they would not be doing a deal at the value of in excess of £65 million. So I think Antoine Semenyo at another time, had the stars aligned a little bit more, would have been someone that I'd be sitting there saying, go and get him for that money. Go and get it done. But the timing doesn't work for me. The timing does not work. And when you think about all the players that we've got to come back, and yes, of course, they've got to come back. And then on top of that, they got to perform. But I cannot see Arsenal making an offer of that sort of money for a player that would come in and create even more congestion. And I know people keep saying the squad can never be too big because look how many injuries we've got and look how many injuries we've had at the start of the season. And I completely agree with that. But I just feel like while I like this player, the timing does not work. It's not right. And I'll be interested to get you guys' thoughts on this before we wrap up. Al Max says, that is a good price. Semenyo would do wonders. Guna Oz asked the question, do we need Semenyo? Our attacking options are stacked with players coming back from injuries. I agree. Amberley says, we aren't going to get him in January, but I wonder if Arteta might have a word like he did with Zubimendi. There is that possibility. There is that possibility that you approach him, you have the conversation, and you say, look, if you can hold on till the summer, we can potentially make something work with the potential of some exits and some departures. But then where do Bournemouth factor into that? Because obviously Bournemouth stand to earn less money come the summer. So will there be an element of Bournemouth trying to push him out of the door if that big offer comes in January, rather than the summer? But at the same time, if Bournemouth fancy their chances of maybe sneaking into the Conference League or into the Europa League, they certainly stand a far better chance of achieving that with Antoine Semenyo. And then so can that shortfall and that difference in the 2 price points, can that be compensated for by having a better season, finishing 3-4 places up the Premier League financially? Can probably earn 10-12 million pound extra from that, which might make up the difference between what the clause is set at in January and what the clause reverts to come the summer. So, there's a lot to factor in. It's a really, really interesting conversation and discussion. But again, for me, it's nothing to do with the player. At the start of the season, so go back to the summer when he was being discussed as a wide option, I got to be honest, I wasn't really feeling it. I was a bit unsure. I'd seen good things from him last season, but I wasn't sure if he'd carry that on. I wasn't sure if it was a purple patch rather than a true indication of the player's level. But over time, I've become more and more convinced that Antoine Semenyo is a really handy and useful player. And I think the more I watch him, the more I'm impressed by his all-round game, his work rate, his mobility. I think all of these things would would work for Mikel and would work for Arsenal in their current iteration. But I just don't think the timing works right now. I don't think the stars have aligned for us to make this one happen at this stage. IA says, good morning, Harry. Why do people think Liverpool have the money to sign him and we don't? Well, Liverpool spent a hell of a lot of money in the summer, didn't they? So, yeah, I'll be surprised if they went and spent big on a wide player going into the January window. But stranger things have happened, I suppose. Jid says fans need to evolve their football analysis beyond constantly demanding new players. Jesus, Dalman, Saka, Noni, Eze, Havertz, Martinelli, Trossard, Waneri, Gyökeres, and Harry Mananous, with Marino also in contention. That's around 12 players for the front three positions. It's a good point. And Jid, I need to message you back, by the way. Apologies, I completely forgot, and just seeing your name come up has reminded me. Auntie Clockwise says only way he's coming in is if someone is going out. I agree with that. Potential Trossard sale in the summer is what people are saying. Maybe, you know, when his stock is high, if he continues to perform the way he is right now, we'll see. Amberley says, I think Spurs are the only ones who might pounce in January. Whether he'd go there or not, I doubt it, though. That's interesting. I think Spurs are really lacking firepower. And Buddy Lad makes a good point about I should say, makes a good point about Liverpool. They did make a lot in sales, but they also spent 250 million quid pretty much on top of that 200 million. So they still might find that difficult financially to maneuver. But yeah, okay, those are our topics for today. Just a quick update as well. Lots and lots of you have been asking about the Discord server over the last couple of days. As soon as I upload today's pod, I'm going to create a new one. YouTube members will get access to it, and Patreon members will get access to it as well. What I will say, right, is because I know there's a lot of you that are YouTube members. That's absolutely fine. If you want to remain YouTube members, that is fine, and you'll get access to the Discord server. But there is more available on Patreon, because Patreon is a much easier platform for me to operate and for me to sort of work with. Also, they don't take like 50% of the membership as well, whereas YouTube do. So really, you're supporting YouTube as much as you're supporting us, and that's fine. If you want, if that arrangement works for you and it's easier for you, no problem. Okay, I appreciate the support, I really do. But from Patreon side of things, you'll get more bang for your buck, and so I would encourage you, if you want to come over there, and I promise you'll have a better experience than you get here. Don't forget, if you want to become a patron, you could do so by clicking the link in the description below. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you can become a Chronicles of a Gooner patron, get access to bonus content, get access to all our content ad-free, and you become a part of that community as well. And yeah, let's catch up on the next one. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. If you're with us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review, and I will see you all on the next episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner pod. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Semenyo time. Come on, you gunners.